History tells us that power is forged in the furnace of violence. We are taught that a king is only as strong as the steel he commands, that a crown without a sword is nothing more than a target. Welcome to ArchLore Chronicles. In the dark heart of the early Middle Ages, a shadow fell over the most violent warriors the world had ever known. These were men who lived for the raid and died for the kill. Yet they laid down their weapons. They knelt. Not because a blade was at their throats, but because of a power they couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't escape. Imagine a king who didn't need to raise a shield. A king who could command obedience without drawing a sword, not because he lacked power, but because he had something far more dangerous than an army. This is not a legend, it is the story of how the cross conquered the hammer, the birth of an empire built on the ruins of the soul, the land of wolves. The year is 500 AD, the Roman sun has set, leaving Europe in a cold, chaotic twilight. To the south, the marble pillars are crumbling into the dust of a forgotten civilization. To the north, the forests are screaming with the sounds of tribal expansion. The Germanic tribes, the Franks, the Goths, the Alemanni, were not a nation. They were a storm of shifting alliances and blood-soaked rivalries. Their culture was built on the comitatus, a terrifying blood oath of loyalty to a war leader. Strength was the only currency. Mercy was a death sentence. To rule here, you didn't just need an army, you needed to be the deadliest man in the room, capable of outkilling any challenger who looked at your throne with hunger. Into this vacuum of blood and iron stepped a figure who defied every law of nature. This wasn't just a man, it was a new kind of rulership. A fusion of crown and faith, where kings like Clovis I didn't just command warriors, they commanded belief itself. While other kings built walls of stone, he built cathedrals of the mind. While others sharpened spears, he sharpened a narrative so potent it could paralyze a warrior's arm mid-swing. The mystery remains, how does a man command the obedience of wolves when he carries no teeth? The brutal reality, a world of blood, feuds. To understand the miracle of this king's rule, one must understand the people he tamed. These weren't just soldiers, they were a society designed for perpetual war. The Germanic tribes lived by the law of the Wehrgild, the man price. It was a primitive, brutal accounting system. If you killed a man, his family killed yours, or you paid a price in gold that was never high enough to satisfy the hunger for revenge. Violence was a mathematical certainty. It was an endless cycle of ancestral vengeance that kept the soil wet with blood for centuries. These were men who laughed at the Roman gods and found the Christian God of peace pathetic. Why follow a deity who allowed himself to be crucified? They wanted Thor, the Thunderbringer. They wanted Odin, the god of the slain. They wanted gods who bled, killed, and rewarded the violent with a seat in a golden hall of battle. Their kings were first among equals. If a king failed to provide gold from a raid, or if he showed a moment of physical weakness, a limp, a grey hair, a hesitation, he was discarded. His throat was cut, and a stronger man took the seat. In this world, the idea of a king without an army wasn't just unlikely, it was a suicide mission. Before we reveal the psychological weapon that finally broke these warriors, I want to hear from you. If you were a tribal warlord in 500 AD, what would it take for you to surrender your sword to an unarmed man? Fear of death or fear of the unknown? Drop a comment below, I read every single one. The king of the spirit, the architect of belief. The shift began with a terrifying realization. The blade can control a man's body, but it can never own his soul. A conquered man waits for a moment to strike back. A converted man serves you even in his dreams. Enter the figure of the Christian king, not just as a man, but as a ghost in the machine of tribal life. Whether it was the legacy of Clovis I or the silent, creeping influence of the papal authority, the strategy was chilling, the divine mandate. The king realized that if he became the bridge between the tribes and the Almighty, he no longer needed to threaten them with death. The army still existed, but it was no longer the source of his power. It became secondary. The real control had shifted somewhere invisible. He could threaten them with eternity. He brought in the bishop's men who carried no weapons, yet spoke of eternity with terrifying certainty. They didn't conquer land, they conquered imagination. He replaced the tribal blood feud with a higher law, one that claimed to be etched into the fabric of the universe itself. He told the warriors that their strength didn't come from their arms, but from a divine grace that only he could dispense. He wasn't just a leader, he was the gatekeeper of the afterlife. Suddenly, to disobey the king wasn't just a rebellion, it was a sin. It was a one-way ticket to a darkness far deeper than any forest in Germania. The weapon of belief. Psychological warfare. How did he do it? through the most sophisticated rebranding in human history. He didn't try to destroy their culture, he hijacked it. He took the Germanic love for the Lord the Ring Giver, who rewards loyalty, and redirected it toward Christ, whom he framed as the heavenly chieftain. He portrayed the apostles not as peaceful fishermen, but as a warrior band, a divine comitatus. He turned the Mass into a ritual of fealty, where the wine was the blood of a king more powerful than any earthly rival. The king began to rule through the peace of God. He issued edicts that forbade fighting on certain days, effectively pausing the wheels of war by decree. He protected the weak, not with shields but with the threat of excommunication, the ultimate social death. Imagine a battle-hardened warlord, covered in the scars of 100 raids, trembling before an unarmed man in a silk robe. Not because the man could kill him, but because the man could erase him from history in the afterlife. To be excommunicated was to be a ghost among the living. No one would feed you. No one would house you. No one would bury you in the earth. The sword kills the man, the king kills the legacy. The turning of the tide. The turning point came when the tribes realized that the king's lack of force was actually his greatest strength. When Clovis I, a battle-hardened war leader, converted to Christianity after victory in battle, it sent a shockwave through the tribes. If a king forged in blood could kneel to an unseen power, then this was not weakness. It was something greater. In a world of 1,000 warlords, everyone was a target. But the unarmed king, he was the only one who didn't want your land, he wanted your allegiance. By not having an army, the king became the only neutral party in a world of constant war. He became the ultimate judge, the arbiter of disputes that had lasted for generations. Tribes that had been killing each other for centuries finally found a center that didn't move. They submitted to him because he was the only thing they all had in common. The king had done something no warlord ever could. He made obedience feel voluntary. He made submission feel like salvation. He replaced tribal sovereignty with a single divine identity. He didn't need to conquer them. They had already volunteered for his kingdom. Power had shifted forever. It was no longer about who had the biggest axe. It was about who held the keys to the kingdom of heaven. The wolves had been collared by a prayer, and they didn't even realize the leash was being pulled tight. The legacy of invisible power. The king who ruled without an army taught us a terrifying truth about the nature of power. True control doesn't require a police state, a heavy hand, or a standing military. It requires a shared story. He laid the blueprint for the modern world where influence, soft power, and cultural narrative are the true weapons of the elite. He proved that if you can make a man believe in something bigger than himself, you don't need to watch his hands. His heart will do the work for you. His guilt will keep him in line. His hope will keep him serving. The Germanic tribes weren't conquered by a general. They were captured by a vision that was more powerful than any steel ever forged. We like to think we are beyond the superstitions of the Dark Ages. We like to think we only obey what is rational and what is forced. But look around. What stories do you obey today without a single threat being made? The most powerful kings in history didn't rule with swords. They ruled with stories. So ask yourself, what story are you obeying without ever being forced? If this story shook your understanding of history, hit the like button and subscribe to ArchLore Chronicles. The past is never truly dead. It's just waiting for a new storyteller to wake it up.